I caught my wife cheating with two men. So I ruined their lives and left them with nothing. Hello, read it. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's been played for a fool. Some men see it coming, noticing the small cracks before the whole foundation collapses. Others, like me, get blindsided, left standing in the wreckage of a life they thought was real, staring at the pieces and wondering how they never noticed the walls rotting from the inside. My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 36 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've been living in a carefully constructed illusion, a lie so well-crafted that I believed it completely, never questioning that the woman I loved, the woman I built a life with, was hiding something beneath the surface. I met Lauren when I was 28. She was 26 at the time, full of ambition, charm, and a kind of effortless beauty that made people gravitate toward her. She had this energy about her, the type of presence that could fill a room, making everyone feel like they were in the presence of someone special. And for a long time, I felt like the luckiest man in the world because out of everyone, she had chosen me. We moved fast. Within a year, we were living together. 2 years in, we were married. It felt right. It felt easy. Lauren had a way of making life feel like an adventure, like every day had a purpose. She worked in marketing, always juggling clients, projects, and events. I worked in finance, living a more structured, methodical life, but it never felt like we were on different pages. If anything, we complemented each other. Where I was steady, she was spontaneous. Where I was logical, she was creative. It worked, or at least I thought it did. Our life was good. A nice house in a respectable neighborhood. Weekend trips, dinner parties, long conversations about the future. We had talked about kids, though we were never in a rush. We had a 5-year plan. Travel first. Build savings. Buy a second property. Then maybe start a family. Everything felt like it was moving according to plan. But when I look back, I see the signs. The moments I ignored, the inconsistencies I brushed aside. It started small, missed calls, late nights at the office that became more frequent, vague explanations that didn't quite add up. Lauren had always been social, always the type to network and meet new people, so I never questioned her when she said she was going out for drinks with coworkers or attending some industry event. It was part of her world, part of who she was. Then came the changes. Subtle at first. She started spending more time at the gym, getting up early to work out, something she had never cared much about before. She was glued to her phone more often, texting late at night with the screen tilted away from me. She had always been affectionate, but there was a shift, something colder beneath the surface, like she was going through the motions rather than feeling them. She was still Lauren, still my wife, but there was a distance growing between us, an invisible wall that I couldn't break through no matter how hard I tried. I told myself it was just a phase. Stress from work, maybe. A natural lull in a long-term relationship. I convinced myself that every marriage had ups and downs, and that whatever this was, it would pass. I buried the unease, pushed away the nagging thoughts that something wasn't right. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. And then, one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday, an ordinary, unremarkable Thursday. Lauren had texted me earlier in the day to say she had a work dinner and would be home late. Nothing unusual. I had come home from work, made myself dinner, and settled in for a quiet night. But around 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, James. We hadn't talked in a while, but the text was short and direct, carrying a weight that sent a chill through my chest before I even opened it. I swiped my screen and saw the photo. Lauren, sitting at a high-end restaurant downtown. But she wasn't at a work dinner. She was with two men. They weren't just having dinner. They were drinking, laughing, touching. One of them had his hand on her thigh. The other was leaning in, whispering something in her ear that made her smile in a way that sent a sharp, sickening feeling straight to my gut. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. My mind refused to process what I was seeing, cycling through excuses, justifications, anything that could make this something other than what it so obviously was. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe. No, I knew exactly what this was. A slow, burning rage spread through me, cold and methodical. I wasn't the kind of man who reacted without thinking. I didn't explode in anger. I didn't pick up the phone and demand answers. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at the photo, feeling something inside me shift. A part of me that had been dormant for years suddenly woke up. Something calculating, something ruthless. I had always been a logical man, a planner, someone who thought 10 steps ahead, always prepared for the unexpected. But I had never considered the possibility that the person I trusted most would betray me so completely. And now, as I sat there, heart pounding, the realization settled in. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. She had lied to me, humiliated me, made a fool out of me while I had spent years building a life for us. And those two men? They were complicit. They weren't just random strangers. If they were bold enough to sit in a public restaurant with her, touching her like they owned her, then they were part of something bigger. No, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to destroy them. Every single one of them. But first, I needed to know everything. This wasn't going to be a blind act of revenge. It was going to be precise, calculated. I was going to find out exactly how long this had been going on, exactly who these men were, and exactly what it would take to bring their lives crumbling down. Because I had been played for a fool, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Betrayal has a way of reshaping a man. It strips away the illusions, the comfortable lies we tell ourselves, and forces us to see the world as it truly is, cold, brutal, and indifferent to the suffering of fools like me. Sitting alone in my house that night, staring at the photo of my wife wrapped up in the attention of two men, I felt the weight of every moment I had spent believing in her, trusting her, defending her. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up late waiting for her, the times I had reassured myself when things fell off, the love I had poured into a marriage that had clearly meant nothing to her. It wasn't sadness that took hold of me. It wasn't grief. It was something darker, a deep, methodical rage that burned slow and cold, sharpening my focus instead of clouding it. I had been played, and now it was my turn to rewrite the game. The first step was gathering information. I wasn't about to confront Lauren without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. If this had been some drunken one-night stand, some moment of weakness, I would have handled things differently. But this wasn't that. The photo told me everything I needed to know. The way she leaned into them, the way they touched her so freely, like they had done it 100 times before. This wasn't new. This wasn't some accident. This was something practiced, something repeated. I needed to know how long it had been happening. I started with her phone records. We had a shared family plan, something she probably never considered could be used against her. I logged into our account and scrolled through months of call logs and text records. She had always been careful, always deleting messages and calls before I could see them. But patterns don't lie. There were gaps, long stretches of time where she had no recorded activity, times that lined up perfectly with her so-called late meetings and girls' nights. That alone wasn't enough. But then, I noticed something that stood out. A second number. A number she had been calling regularly, almost daily, but one that wasn't saved in her contacts. I copied it and ran a quick search. No public records. No attached name. A burner phone. My wife had an entirely separate line of communication that I had never known about. That was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't some casual fling. This was a second life. I wasn't done. The next step was identifying the two men in the photo. One of them I already knew, Adam Grant, a senior executive at Lauren's marketing firm. He had been part of her work life for years, someone she had mentioned in passing, someone I had never considered a threat. Now, seeing him with her, the casual familiarity in the way he touched her, I realized just how blind I had been. The second man was a mystery. He wasn't part of her office, that much I knew. He was younger than Adam, maybe mid-30s, dressed like someone used to power and status. Expensive watch, tailored suit, the kind of effortless confidence that came from knowing he had the upper hand. He wasn't some random stranger. He belonged in her world, which meant I had a way to find him. I used everything I had. Reverse image searches, business directories, old social media posts. And finally, I had a name. David Calloway. Wealthy, connected, and dangerous in ways I hadn't expected. David wasn't just anyone. He was a venture capitalist, someone with deep ties in the business world, someone whose name carried weight. He owned multiple properties, had stakes in several high-end companies, and, most importantly, was married. That changed everything. This wasn't just some affair between consenting adults. Lauren had inserted herself into something far more dangerous. David had a wife with family money, corporate connections, and a reputation to uphold. A wife who, if she found out what her husband had been doing behind her back, had the power to ruin him. And Adam? He wasn't some untouchable executive. He was a man with secrets. A little more digging, and I found out that he had been involved in some shady business dealings in the past. Financial misconduct, corporate fraud. Things that, if brought to light, could not only cost him his career, but send him straight to prison. These men weren't invincible. They had vulnerabilities. And Lauren? She had no idea that she was about to be caught in the middle of a storm she wouldn't escape from. I needed to see it for myself. The next morning, I played the role of the devoted husband, as if nothing had changed. I kissed her goodbye when she left for work, watched her drive away, and then I followed her. I stayed a few cars back, careful, blending into the morning traffic. She drove straight to her office, parked, walked inside like it was just another normal day. I waited. 2 hours later, she left. But she didn't go to a meeting. She didn't go to lunch. She drove across town to a high-end apartment complex, the kind with a security gate and private parking. I stayed back, watching as she punched in a code at the gate and pulled inside. Adam Grant was already there, and so was David Calloway. I watched them greet her, casual, comfortable, like this was routine. She smiled at them, the kind of smile she used to give me, the kind that made me think she was mine. Then, they disappeared into the building together. I didn't need to see what happened next. I already knew. As I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, I realized something that made my pulse slow, my breathing steady. I wasn't just going to confront her. I wasn't going to yell, scream, or ask why. I didn't care why. I didn't care about explanations, about the sob stories, about the pathetic attempts to justify what she had done. I was going to ruin them. All of them. Lauren thought she had been careful, thought she had covered her tracks, thought she was untouchable, but she had underestimated me. She had assumed I would break, that I would react like any other betrayed husband. Angry, emotional, reckless. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Adam had his career, his reputation, his company. David had his wife, his money, his powerful network. And Lauren? She had built her life on a fragile illusion, one that I was about to shatter. I didn't want revenge. I wanted obliteration. And when I was done, none of them would have anything left. Revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about control. It's about taking back the power that was stolen from you and turning it into something undeniable, something devastating. The moment I saw Lauren disappear into that apartment with Adam and David, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't just about exposing an affair. That would be too simple, too easy. No, I was going to dismantle their lives, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the ruins of the world they had built for themselves. I spent the next few days planning. I gathered every piece of information I had on them. Lauren had no idea that I already had access to her financial records, her phone records, and now, her location history thanks to a tracking app she had installed on her own phone months ago and forgotten about. Adam was the easiest to research. He had a long paper trail, one that was littered with questionable financial dealings, unethical business moves, and a few buried scandals that had never quite seen the light of day. And David? He was the prize. The man who had everything to lose. A wife from an influential family, multi-million-dollar investments, a reputation so spotless it was almost comical. He had carefully crafted an image of power and success, but all it would take was a single crack in the foundation for everything to collapse. I knew I couldn't rush this. If I moved too soon, they'd see it coming. I needed to hit them where it hurt the most, without them realizing who was pulling the strings. So I started with the weakest link. Adam. I created an anonymous email account, gathered all the dirt I had on him, and sent it directly to his company's board of directors. Financial discrepancies, shady backdoor deals, falsified reports. It was all there, wrapped up in a neat little package. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. Within 48 hours, Adam's world started to crumble. His accounts were flagged for review, his emails were audited, and rumors began circulating in his office that something big was about to go down. By the end of the week, he was placed on administrative leave. That was the first hit, but it was only the beginning. Lauren was next. She had always been careful with her digital footprint, but she wasn't careful enough. I had access to her emails, her calendar, and more importantly, her work contacts. Using an encrypted server, I sent a batch of edited screenshots to her employer, emails that made it seem like she had been leaking company information to a competitor. I made sure the messages looked legitimate, weaving just enough truth into the lie to make it believable. A week later, she was called into an urgent HR meeting. She came home that night angry, frustrated, talking about internal audits and IT investigations. She had no idea that the walls were already closing in around her. But the real masterpiece was David. Unlike Adam, who could be ruined with a scandal, and Lauren, who could be taken down professionally, David required a more delicate approach. His marriage was the key to his empire. His wife, Emily Calloway, came from old money, the kind of wealth that didn't just disappear overnight. She was the reason David had a seat at the table in high-profile investment deals. She was the reason people took him seriously. And if she found out about his affair, about the double life he was leading, she wouldn't just leave him, she would destroy him. I needed to be patient. I needed to do this right. So I started small. Anonymous notes sent to Emily's office, hinting at her husband's infidelity. Fake social media accounts sending cryptic messages about David's extracurricular activities. I made sure it wasn't enough for her to be certain, just enough for her to start asking questions, start doubting, start watching him. Meanwhile, I kept tracking Lauren. I watched her patterns, the times she met with them, the places she thought were safe. And then, I set the final piece of the plan in motion. One night, while she was at the apartment with Adam and David, I broke into her car. It wasn't hard. Lauren had never been the cautious type. I planted a burner phone inside, loaded with incriminating messages, fake conversations between her and another supposed lover, one who didn't exist. Then, I tipped off her HR department anonymously, hinting that there was more to her absences than just personal matters. The next morning, Lauren woke up to a company-wide scandal. Her bosses were now convinced she had been engaged in multiple affairs with business partners, clients, and even colleagues. She came home that night frantic, pacing, her phone glued to her ear. She had no idea what was happening. No idea why everything was spiraling out of control. She thought she was being careful. She thought she was in control. But she wasn't. I was. And the best part? They still didn't know it was me. David was next. And for him, I had something special planned. His wife, Emily, had been growing suspicious. The anonymous tips, the strange inconsistencies in his schedule, the whispers in her social circles. It was all leading to one inevitable conclusion. She needed proof, and I was going to give it to her. I hired a private investigator, one with a reputation for getting results. I fed him everything he needed, locations, meeting times, even details on the apartment they used. And within a week, he delivered. Crystal clear photos of David and Lauren together. Him kissing her in the hallway. Them entering the apartment, laughing, their hands all over each other. I didn't send the pictures directly to Emily. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I arranged for them to be accidentally delivered to one of her closest friends, someone I knew couldn't resist spreading the gossip. It didn't take long. The moment Emily saw them, the fuse was lit. David's world collapsed overnight. She confronted him in public at a high-profile event, surrounded by their most powerful associates. It wasn't just a fight. It was a spectacle. People whispered, cameras captured every moment. Within hours, rumors were everywhere. By morning, she had locked him out of their home, frozen their joint accounts, and cut off every financial safety net he had. David Calloway, the powerful investor, the man who had built his career on prestige and connections, was suddenly a man with nothing. Lauren wasn't much better off. Her reputation was in shambles, her career was circling the drain, and her relationship with Adam and David, whatever sick dynamic they had, was completely destroyed. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final move to make, something that would ensure that even after the dust settled, even after they picked up the pieces of their shattered lives, they would never forget what they had done to me. And when I played my last card, when I set the final piece of my revenge and emotion, they wouldn't just lose everything. They would wish they had never met me. Revenge isn't just about making someone suffer. It's about taking everything they value, everything they built, and setting it on fire while they watch, helpless. I had already dismantled their lives piece by piece. Adam's career was in ruins, David's marriage had imploded, and Lauren's carefully curated world was falling apart. But I wasn't done. There was still one final move to make, the kind of destruction that left no room for recovery. Lauren had spent years building her career, her reputation, her social standing. She prided herself on being respected in her industry, on being someone people trusted. But trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's impossible to piece back together. She thought the chaos at work was just a bad break, a misunderstanding that would blow over. She had no idea that it was only the beginning. While she was busy trying to salvage what was left of her career, I made sure to destroy whatever goodwill she had left. I leaked the fake emails, the ones that made it look like she had been engaging in multiple affairs, not just with Adam and David, but with clients, colleagues, even executives. The kind of scandal that corporations couldn't afford to be associated with. One by one, her contacts began to distance themselves. No calls returned. No meetings scheduled. The people she once considered allies were now treating her like a liability. Then, I turned my focus to her finances. Lauren had always handled her own money, keeping a separate account from mine. She thought it made her independent. What she didn't know was that I had access to everything. Months ago, she had asked me to help her set up an investment portfolio, something for the future. I had kept the login details, and now I used them. I didn't steal her money. That would have been too simple. Instead, I moved it around, made transactions that looked suspicious, pulled out funds at irregular intervals. It didn't take long before her bank flagged the activity as potential fraud. Her accounts were frozen. Her credit cards declined. She was financially trapped. Her panic must have been delicious. But I wasn't finished yet. David Calloway wasn't just ruined. He was desperate. His wife had locked him out of their accounts. His investors were backing away, and the rumors of his infidelity had spread like wildfire. He thought he could recover, that he could smooth things over and claw his way back to the top. But I had one final gift for him. Buried deep in the records of his investments was something illegal. A fraud scheme, small, subtle, but there. And I made sure the right people found it. An anonymous tip to the SEC. A carefully placed leak to a journalist. And just like that, David Calloway went from being a disgraced businessman to a criminal under investigation. And Adam? He was already circling the drain, but I made sure to give him a push. He thought the worst was behind him, that losing his job was the end of it. What he didn't know was that I had sent evidence of his fraudulent dealings to every competitor in his industry. No one would hire him. No one would take the risk. He wasn't just unemployed, he was blacklisted. The beauty of it all was that none of them knew it was me. They were scrambling, drowning, pointing fingers at each other. David blamed Lauren for ruining his life. Adam blamed David for bringing him into this mess. And Lauren, well, she had no idea which way was up anymore. She was watching everything she had built collapse around her, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. But I had one final act. The final, irreversible destruction of Lauren Carter. She thought she had lost everything already. She had no idea how much further she could fall. I had been waiting for the right moment, watching as she spiraled, her career in tatters, her money locked away, her name dragged through the mud. She had spent years lying to me, betraying me, making a fool out of me. And now, it was time for her to feel what it was like to be truly alone. I filed for divorce. But I didn't just file. I made it public. Lauren had spent years crafting the image of a perfect marriage, a perfect career, a perfect life. And I shattered it in a single move. The documents detailed everything. The infidelity, the financial misconduct, the burner phone, the secret apartment. And I didn't just hand them to my lawyer. I made sure everyone saw them. I had them leaked to her company, her friends, her industry peers. Lauren Carter wasn't just a woman caught cheating. She was a pariah. She tried to reach out to me after that, begging, crying, threatening. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had nothing left to bargain with. No job, no money, no reputación. She had played her game, and she had lost. I walked away from it all, untouched, clean, victorious. And the best part? I was finally free. But Lauren, Adam, and David, they were ruined forever. Revenge isn't just about winning. It's about making sure the people who wronged you can never rise again. That was the promise I had made to myself the night I saw that photo. The night I realized that my marriage, my trust, my love had all been a joke to her. I had played my game carefully, dismantling their lives one calculated strike at a time. Adam was blacklisted, unable to find work in his field, his career in ruins. David was facing criminal investigations. His wife had left him, and every investor who once respected him now treated him like a plague to avoid. Lauren had lost everything: her job, her reputation, her finances. She had gone from being the woman who always had the upper hand to someone whose name people whispered about in disgrace. I had reduced her to nothing, and yet something in me knew it wasn't over. I could feel it, an unfinished thread, something waiting to be tied off. At first, she tried to fight back. Not directly. She wasn't that stupid. She tried to recover, to reach out to her old contacts, to salvage what she could from the wreckage of her life. But I had been thorough. Every door she knocked on was locked. Every opportunity she thought she could chase was already burned to the ground. Friends she once laughed with, co-workers who had admired her, people who used to see her as untouchable. None of them wanted anything to do with her anymore. The stain of scandal had spread too far. She had become a liability, a risk that no one was willing to take. Then, she tried to reach me. She called from unknown numbers, left voicemails I never listened to, sent emails I never opened. At first, the messages were confused, desperate, asking me to explain why I was doing this to her. Then, they turned angry, blaming me for her downfall, accusing me of ruining her life out of spite. Eventually, they became something else entirely. Broken, hollow pleas for me to answer, for me to acknowledge her existence. But I never did. She didn't deserve my words. She didn't deserve my time. She had made her choices, and I had simply ensured she paid the price for them. Weeks passed, then months. And just when I thought it was over, when I thought she had finally accepted that she had lost, she showed up. It was late, almost midnight, when I pulled into my driveway and felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. It was a feeling I'd learned to trust, something primal, something that tightened in my gut before my mind could process it. I didn't react immediately. I sat in the car for a moment, scanning the shadows, waiting, and then I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the driveway, just far enough away that I might have missed her if I hadn't been looking. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled like she had been wearing them for days, and even in the dim light, I could see that she had lost weight. She didn't look like the woman I had married. She didn't even look like the woman I had destroyed. She looked like someone who had been hollowed out, drained of everything that once made her who she was. I stepped out of the car, but I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. She took a slow step forward, her arms crossed over her chest, like she was trying to hold herself together. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Are you happy?" She didn't say it like an accusation. She said it like a real question, like she genuinely wanted to know if I had found peace in her destruction. I didn't answer. I just watched her, waiting. She let out a small, bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You won, Ryan. You got everything you wanted. You destroyed me." I expected her to be angry, to lash out, to try to justify what she had done, or at the very least to blame me for the way things had ended. But instead, she just stood there, looking at me like she was waiting for something, waiting for me to break, to show her some part of me that still cared, that still hurt. But I didn't. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no chat, just emptiness. She sighed, her shoulders slumping like she had finally accepted what I had known for months. This was over. Truly over. I thought you loved me, she murmured, almost to herself. Maybe I had once. Maybe that was the real tragedy of all of this. That I had once given my heart to someone who was never worthy of it. That I had believed in a future that had never really existed. But that didn't matter anymore. I had burned it all down, and she was standing in the ashes, realizing too late that she had lost something she could never get back. She took another step forward, her eyes searching mine for something, anything, that might still connect us. And when she found nothing, when she finally understood that there was nothing left between us, she exhaled softly and gave me a small, almost sad smile. You don't understand, do you? She whispered. That I was never supposed to lose. She shook her head, her expression unreadable. You were supposed to be the safe bet, the man who would always forgive, who would never see me for what I really was. Her words should have stung, but they didn't. I had already come to terms with that truth long ago. I wasn't the safe bet anymore. I wasn't the man she thought she could manipulate, cheat on, and discard when she was done. I had become something else entirely, and that scared her more than anything. She took a step back, studying me one last time before letting out a slow, controlled breath. Now I have nothing left to lose. And then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I didn't stop her. I didn't watch to see where she went. I just stood there, waiting until the sound of her footsteps faded into the night. And then I went inside, locking the door behind me. I never saw her again. I didn't check to see where she ended up, didn't ask around about what happened to her after that night. Maybe she tried to rebuild, maybe she drifted from city to city, or maybe she just faded into the background, another name that people eventually forgot. I didn't care. She was just a ghost now, a shadow of someone I used to know. I, on the other hand, moved forward. I left the city, started fresh in a place where no one knew my name, where I wasn't the man who had been betrayed or the man who had destroyed his enemies. I built a new life, a real one, free of the lies and deception that had once surrounded me. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. In the end, there was no grand moment of triumph. No cinematic ending where I stood over the wreckage of their lives with a victorious smirk. Just silence. Just the realization that I had won so completely that even she didn't know who she was anymore. And maybe that was the best revenge of all. Because while I walked away whole, while I walked away with a future, Lauren, Adam, and David were left with nothing. No power, no status, no control. They were forgotten. And I was finally free.